Captain Marcus Webb's fingers flew across the tactical console as another wave of contacts appeared on Luna Station's long-range sensors. The numbers made his stomach clench, not hundreds of ships this time, but thousands. The Dominion fleet had arrived in force, and they weren't here to negotiate. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures off the scale," Lieutenant Park called from the sensor station. Her voice remained steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Whatever weapons those ships are carrying, they're nothing like our projections." Marcus studied the holographic display hovering above the command center. The alien vessels appeared as crimson points of light, arranged in geometric patterns that suggested both mathematical precision and predatory intent. Behind him, through the reinforced observation dome, Earth hung like a blue marble against the velvet darkness, beautiful, fragile, and now desperately vulnerable. "Time until they reach engagement range?" Marcus asked. 17 minutes at current velocity, Park replied. "The fleet is moving to intercept." Marcus watched as humanity's defenders took up positions. Every spacefaring nation had contributed vessels to this moment. The North American battle carriers formed the center line, their launch bays already disgorging hundreds of interceptors. European destroyers established a defensive perimeter, their point defense systems cycling through pre-battle diagnostics. Asian and South American frigates spread into flanking positions, ready to exploit any opening in the alien formation. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, 847 capital ships, over 2,000 fighters, and tens of thousands of personnel who had trained their entire lives for combat. Against any human enemy, it would have been overwhelming. Against the Dominion, it looked like children's toys. "All stations, this is Luna Actual," Marcus transmitted on the fleet-wide channel. "You know what's at stake. Every second we hold them is another second for evacuations planetside. Make every shot count. Make them remember that humans don't go quietly into the night." Responses flooded back, acknowledgments from ship captains, war cries from fighter pilots, prayers from chaplains scattered throughout the fleet. Marcus felt the weight of their trust pressing down on him like a physical force. The Dominion ships didn't slow as they approached engagement range. They didn't alter formation or display any sign of caution. They simply advanced with the inevitability of a tidal wave, and when they opened fire, reality itself seemed to scream. The aliens' weapons defied physics as humans understood it. There were no missiles, no laser beams, no kinetic projectiles. Instead, sections of space simply, inverted. Where moments before there had been human warships, now there was nothing, not even debris. The vessels didn't explode or fragment, they ceased to exist, leaving behind only rapidly dispersing clouds of exotic particles that Marcus's sensors couldn't classify. "Jesus Christ," Park whispered. "They're not destroying our ships. They're unmaking them." The human fleet fought back with everything it had. Nuclear-tipped missiles streaked toward the alien formation, only to detonate harmlessly against shimmering barriers that absorbed the explosions like water accepting raindrops. Railgun slugs traveling at fractional light speed struck alien hulls and shattered, the kinetic energy dissipating across defensive fields that humans had only theorized about. Fighter pilots pressed their attacks with suicidal courage, weaving between capital ships, trying desperately to find weak points in the alien defenses. Marcus watched their transponder signals on his display, each one representing a human life, someone's son or daughter, someone who had dreamed of the stars and now faced their extinction among them. Commander Sarah Chen led the vanguard, her squadron executing maneuvers that pushed their fighters to the breaking point. Marcus had reviewed her file before the battle, youngest person to ever qualify for combat flight status, tactical genius, nerves of steel. If anyone could make a difference, it would be her. For 12 minutes, it almost looked possible. Chen's pilots discovered that the alien point defense systems had blind spots near the ship's equatorial sections. They exploited this ruthlessly, darting in to deliver their payloads before spinning away. 3 alien vessels showed signs of damage, their perfect formations disrupted. Then the Dominion deployed their heavy destroyers. These ships were different, darker, larger, surrounded by an aura that made them difficult to look at directly even through the sensors. When they fired, the effect was even more horrifying than the standard weapons. Entire squadrons of human fighters didn't just vanish, they inverted, collapsing into points of impossible brightness before winking out. "What the hell are those things?" Marcus demanded. "I don't know, sir," Park said, her voice now openly shaking. "The energy readings suggest they're not destroying matter, they're displacing it. Maybe into other dimensions, maybe just scattering it across space-time. Our sensors can't track what happens to the ships once they're hit." Marcus forced himself to watch as humanity's defenses crumbled. The heavy destroyers moved through the fleet like reapers through wheat, their reality-warping weapons reaching out to erase warships that represented decades of human engineering and thousands of lives. "All fighters, execute Cascade Protocol," Marcus transmitted. The order tasted like ash in his mouth. "I repeat, all fighters execute Cascade Protocol immediately." There was a moment of silence across the fleet channels. Then Chen's voice came through, tight with controlled emotion. "Luna Actual, confirm Cascade Protocol." "Are we really doing this?" "Confirmed, Commander. Cascade Protocol is in effect. All fighters are to disengage and return to Earth. Scatter pattern November 7. Good luck." "Copy that, Luna Actual." Chen's voice carried something Marcus couldn't quite identify, not fear, not resignation, but something else. Something almost like determination. "All fighters, you heard the captain. Break off and head for home. Execute scatter pattern November 7 on my mark." "Mark." Marcus watched the tactical display as the surviving fighters, less than half of what they'd started with, broke formation and streaked toward Earth. They didn't regroup at the lunar defense platforms. They didn't fall back to the orbital weapons stations. They simply scattered in all directions, each fighter taking a different trajectory toward the planet below. The capital ships lasted another 8 minutes. Marcus stood at his post, coordinating the final defense even as Luna Station shuddered under near-miss impacts. He watched the North American battle carrier Valiant fold in on itself, its 3,000 crew members gone in an instant. He saw the European destroyer cluster make a final, desperate charge directly into the Dominion formation, buying precious seconds with their sacrifice. When the end came for Luna Station, it came quickly. The reinforced dome above Marcus's head began to shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen. He had time to think of his sister on Earth, of his parents buried in Colorado, of all the things he'd never get to do. Then the universe turned inside out, and Captain Marcus Webb stopped being. 3,000 kilometers below, Warlord Kresh stood in the command center of his planetary assault carrier, watching holographic representations of the human homeworld. His chitinous exoskeleton clicked with satisfaction as the last of the human orbital defenses winked out. "Standard conquest pattern," he rumbled to his staff. "The prey species fought bravely but futilely. Now comes the occupation phase. Sub-Commander Vex, what is the status of our ground forces?" The smaller alien consulted his datapad with 3 of his 6 arms. "Ground forces are deployed in all major population centers, Warlord. Initial resistance was minimal. Some small arms fire from primitive kinetic weapons, but nothing that threatened our shields. The humans appear to be confused." "Confused?" Kresh tilted his head, which among his species indicated puzzlement. "Explain." "They're not responding according to any conquered species profile in our databases. There are no government officials attempting to negotiate. No military forces regrouping for a last stand. No mass civilian panic. They're just going about their daily routines, mostly. Some are even approaching our perimeter posts with what our translators identify as gifts." Kresh felt a flicker of unease. In his 3 decades of service to the Dominion, he had overseen 14 planetary conquests. Each followed a predictable pattern: military defeat, followed by attempts at negotiation, followed by grudging submission. The humans had been defeated decisively, but they were skipping all the intermediate steps. And the human fighters that retreated to the planet's surface? That's the truly anomalous part, Warlord. We tracked approximately 900 fighters entering the atmosphere. They scattered across the planet using randomized flight paths. We expected them to regroup at hidden military bases, but instead. Vex consulted his datapad again. Instead, they landed in civilian areas and the pilots simply disappeared. We've found 17 abandoned fighters so far. The pilots removed their transponders and identification before leaving. Send ground forces to capture these pilots, Kresh ordered. They'll be useful for understanding human command structure. We've tried, Warlord. The pilots have vanished into the civilian populations. Without transponders or uniforms, they're indistinguishable from any other human. And when we question civilians about military personnel in their areas, they claim to know nothing. Kresh studied the holographic display of Earth's major cities. In his experience, defeated militaries either fought to the last soldier or surrendered formally. They didn't just evaporate into the civilian population. It was inefficient, illogical, and completely contrary to every tactical doctrine in the Dominion's extensive military database. Perhaps they're simply cowards, suggested Subcommander Vex. Running to hide among their own kind, hoping we'll overlook them. Perhaps, Kresh said, but he didn't believe it. He'd watched the recordings of the space battle. Those human pilots had pressed their attacks long past the point of rationality, sacrificing themselves to buy mere seconds for their comrades. Those weren't the actions of cowards. They were the actions of soldiers who believed absolutely in their cause. So why would such soldiers abandon their weapons and hide among civilians? Continue monitoring all human communications, Kresh ordered. I want to know what they're planning. And increase surveillance in cities where fighters landed. The pilots are there somewhere, and eventually they'll reveal themselves. Yes, Warlord. Kresh turned back to the holographic Earth, feeling that flicker of unease grow stronger. In his experience, prey species were predictable. Humans, it seemed, were something else entirely. On the planet below, in a small apartment in Berlin, Commander Sarah Chen removed her flight suit for the last time. She folded it carefully, along with her identification tags, and placed them in a drawer. Then she pulled on civilian clothes, jeans, a simple shirt, a jacket that had belonged to her brother before he died in the Mars colonies. She looked at herself in the mirror. Not a fighter pilot. Not Commander Chen. Just Sarah, one of 8 billion humans trying to survive an impossible situation. Her communicator buzzed with an encrypted message, Cascade Protocol in effect. Phase 1 complete. All units are to integrate and wait for Phase 2 authorization. Estimated timeline, 90 to 120 days. Stay safe. Stay hidden. Stay ready. Sarah deleted the message and destroyed the communicator's memory chip. Then she stepped out into the Berlin evening, just another person walking home from work, invisible among the crowds. The aliens thought the battle was over. They had no idea it was just beginning. 93 days after the fall of Luna Station, Warlord Kresh stood in his command center and admitted to himself that something was profoundly wrong with the occupation of Earth. Another supply convoy attacked, Subcommander Vex reported, his voice tight with frustration. That's the 15th this week. The humans used improvised explosives hidden in civilian vehicles. By the time our forces responded, the attackers had disappeared into the population. Kresh's mandibles clicked with annoyance. And the surveillance drones? We had 6 monitoring that sector. All 6 experienced simultaneous system failures 30 seconds before the attack. Our technicians believe the humans have developed a way to hack our network. Impossible. Our encryption protocols are mathematically unbreakable by their primitive computers. Yes, Warlord. Which is why we suspect they're not using computers. Kresh turned to face his subcommander. Explain. Vex manipulated his datapad, projecting a series of incident reports. Over the past month, we've documented 214 separate sabotage incidents across the planet. Destroyed supply depots, compromised communication relays, assassinated occupation officials, disrupted resource extraction. Each attack follows a different pattern, uses different methods, occurs in different locations. But they all share one characteristic: they exploit vulnerabilities that shouldn't be predictable. You're saying the humans have inside information about our operations. More than that, Warlord. I'm saying they have people inside our operations. Our security checkpoints, our supply chains, our communication networks. The humans we've recruited as collaborators and civilian administrators, we've screened them all according to standard protocols, but somehow the resistance is getting detailed intelligence about our movements. Kresh felt his unease crystallize into genuine concern. Show me the attack patterns. A holographic map of Earth appeared, scattered with red markers indicating sabotage incidents. At first glance, they seemed random. But as Kresh studied the display, he began to see the underlying structure. The attacks weren't random at all, they were coordinated, part of a larger strategy designed to disrupt specific aspects of the occupation. Resource extraction facilities had been hit first, slowing the Dominion's ability to harvest Earth's minerals and biological resources. Then communication relays, forcing the occupation forces to rely on less secure channels. Then supply routes, stretching logistics thin. Each wave of attacks built on the previous one, creating cascading failures across the occupation infrastructure. This is military planning, Kresh said slowly. Professional military planning. But their military was destroyed. We watched it happen. Yes, Warlord. We destroyed their ships and their stations. But we didn't destroy their soldiers, we just made them invisible. The realization hit Kresh like a physical blow. The Cascade Protocol. The scattered fighters. The pilots who had vanished into civilian populations. They didn't abandon their posts, he said, his voice rough with dawning understanding. They infiltrated their own civilization. Those pilots, those soldiers, they're still fighting. They just removed their uniforms first. Vex nodded grimly. We've been analyzing human communication intercepts with this hypothesis in mind. 93 days ago, we heard panicked civilian chatter, emergency services, normal people being normal. Now we're hearing the same thing, but our linguistic analysis suggests subtle differences in speech patterns, stress responses, and information distribution. We believe a significant percentage of the civilians we've been interacting with are actually trained military personnel. How many? Unknown, Warlord. But consider, the humans had approximately 50,000 personnel in their space forces. When we defeated their fleet, maybe 10,000 survived. Those 10,000 scattered across a planet with 8 billion inhabitants. They could be anyone. The clerk processing supply requisitions. The construction worker building our garrison. The translator helping us communicate with civilians. Any of them could be a soldier waiting for orders. Kresh studied the map again, seeing it with new eyes. The humans hadn't surrendered. They hadn't regrouped. They'd done something far more dangerous, they'd become ghosts, indistinguishable from their own population, impossible to root out without alienating the entire civilian base. This is unprecedented, he said. I've conquered 14 worlds. Not one of them tried anything like this. The other species valued honor, Warlord. Formal military traditions, clear chains of command, separation between military and civilian populations. Humans appear to value survival over honor. They're willing to blur every line, break every convention, if it means continuing the fight. Then we increase security. Screen every civilian, scan for military training, use truth detection technology. We've tried, Warlord. The humans have countermeasures. They've developed techniques to fool our scanners, biofeedback control, memory compartmentalization, false physiological responses. And even when we identify a suspected insurgent, arresting them causes civilian unrest. The humans protect their own, even when they must know they're harboring resistance fighters. Kresh was about to respond when alarms blared throughout the command center. Multiple screens flashed crimson warnings. "What now?" he demanded. "Garrison 7 is under attack," a technician called. "Reports of coordinated assault from multiple directions. They're using our own weapons, stolen from the armory 3 weeks ago. Scramble response forces. Garrison 3 is also under attack. And 5. And 12. The technician's voice rose with panic. "Warlord, we're receiving distress calls from 17 garrisons simultaneously. All major population centers. The humans are attacking everywhere at once." Kresh stared at the tactical display as red alerts multiplied across the planet's surface. This wasn't a scattered resistance anymore. This was a full-scale uprising, coordinated across continents, timed to stretch his forces to the breaking point. "How?" he whispered. "How are they coordinating without communications we can intercept?" "They're not using communications, Warlord," Vex said quietly. "They're using people. The same invisible soldiers who've been living among civilians for 3 months. They received their orders face-to-face, impossible to intercept. And now they're executing a plan they've been preparing since the day they've retreated from space." For the first time in his military career, Warlord Kresh felt genuine fear. His forces were powerful, technologically superior, capable of destroying any human military formation. But how do you fight an enemy who looks exactly like everyone else? How do you occupy a planet when you can't tell soldier from civilian, when every handshake might be reconnaissance, when every smile might hide a knife? The humans had turned their greatest weakness, their technological inferiority, into a strategic advantage. They couldn't win a conventional war, so they'd simply refuse to fight one. Instead, they'd created a nightmare scenario where the Dominion's advanced weapons meant nothing because there were no targets to shoot. "All forces to defensive positions," Kresh ordered. "Recall all patrols to fortified garrisons. And send a message to Dominion High Command, Earth is not conquered. Request immediate reinforcements and authorization to implement Scorched World protocols." "Warlord," Vex said carefully, "Scorched World protocols mean eliminating the civilian population. That's 30 billion potential work units. The Dominion will lose more in resources than they gain from conquest." "I know. But what choice do we have? We can't control a population that's fighting us with every breath while pretending to cooperate. Either we break their will to resist completely, or we abandon this world." Before Vex could respond, another technician called out, "Warlord, we're receiving a broadcast on all frequencies. It's from the humans. Audio only. Play it." The voice that filled the command center was female, calm, and utterly confident. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Forces. 93 days ago, you destroyed our fleet and thought you defeated us. You were wrong. We didn't retreat, we advanced to our real battlefield. For 3 months, we've lived among our people, learned your protocols, identified your weaknesses. We've waited and watched and prepared. And now, we're reminding you of something important. You can conquer our sky, you can destroy our ships, but you'll never conquer humans. Because we don't just fight with weapons, we fight with patience, with adaptation, with our absolute refusal to accept defeat. You wanted Earth? Welcome to the longest, bloodiest occupation of your empire's history. We'll make you pay for every kilometer you hold, every day you stay. And in the end, you'll leave, not because you were defeated in battle, but because the cost of staying became unbearable. This is our planet. And we're just getting started." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Kresh stared at the holographic Earth, seeing it now not as a conquered world but as a trap, a planet full of hidden soldiers, endless resistance, and a population that would never, ever stop fighting. The Dominion could glass the planet from orbit, but that would mean admitting defeat. They could increase their garrison, but every soldier sent would just become another target for invisible enemies. "Sub-Commander," Kresh said quietly, draft a message to High Command. Inform them that Earth may not be worth the cost of occupation. Request permission to negotiate withdrawal. Vex stared at him in shock. Warlord, the Dominion doesn't negotiate. We conquer or we destroy. Then perhaps it's time to learn a new option. Because these humans have taught me something I never expected, sometimes the weakest enemy is the most dangerous, not because of what they can do in battle, but because they refuse to accept that the battle is over. On the streets of Berlin, Sarah Chen removed her civilian jacket and pulled on her old flight suit. Around her, hundreds of other civilians did the same, revealing the soldiers they'd been all along. They moved with purpose through the city, heading toward their targets with the confidence of people who'd spent 3 months learning every detail of the enemy's operations. The aliens had made a mistake, Sarah thought. They'd assumed that defeating humanity's military meant defeating humanity itself. They'd forgotten that every soldier is also a human being, capable of patience, deception, and adaptation. They'd treated Earth as just another conquest, never realizing that they were facing a species that had spent its entire history learning to survive against impossible odds. The battle for Earth wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now the humans had the advantage they'd been preparing for, the enemy no longer knew who to shoot. Sarah smiled grimly as she checked her weapon. The aliens wanted a war. Fine. They'd get one unlike anything their empire had ever seen, a war without front lines, without uniforms, without rules. A war where every human was a potential soldier, and every day of occupation cost the invaders more than they could afford to pay. The Cascade Protocol had worked exactly as intended. Humanity hadn't surrendered when its fighters fell. It had simply changed the battlefield.